The void stretched endlessly, a silence so deep it seemed to have swallowed time itself. Then, in the abyss, a whisper. A pulse flickered through the black, a beacon long forgotten, buried under layers of ice and obscurity. It had not been meant to wake anything. It was a cry for help, a relic from an age that had burned itself out. And yet, in the husk of a dead star, something moved. Deep within the tomb of steel, dim amber lights flickered to life. Systems rebooted, cycling from slumber to full readiness. Monolithic machinery groaned, shifting after 700 years of absolute stillness. The giant warship, Hellwinter, exhaled its first breath in centuries. A single screen illuminated within the vast darkness of the command chamber, displaying a stream of old human script. Cryogenic stasis terminated. Subject, Commander Orion Dane. Systems at 34% functionality. Mission status, awaken. The stasis pod hissed violently, fog rolling off its edges. Ice cracked. Metal groaned. Then, a slow intake of breath. A sharp exhale. A hand twitched, fingers curling into a fist. Orion Dane's eyes snapped open. The cold clung to his muscles like steel chains. His limbs were sluggish, his body protesting movement. 700 years of sleep had tried to kill him, but war never lets go of its champions. He forced himself upright, every breath a fight against gravity. His vision swam before sharpening. The lights overhead adjusted automatically, bathing the chamber in dim red illumination. A voice, smooth but tinged with artificial command, cut through the silence. Commander Dane. You have been revived. The AI's voice was cold, efficient. Orion ran a hand over his face, wiping away the frost and grogginess. His pulse slowed, instinct overriding weakness. Maelstrom, he rasped. Status report. The warship's AI responded instantly. You have been in cryogenic stasis for 713 years. The galaxy has changed. Your mission has changed. That made him pause. 700 years? What the hell had happened? His last memory was of fire and war, humanity's final war. The Terran supremacy had been on the verge of collapse, outnumbered and surrounded by the Galactic Accord, an alliance of fragile, arrogant alien civilizations that feared human warfare. But humanity never surrendered. They had built Hellwinter, a warship so advanced, so utterly devastating, that its existence alone had been a declaration of defiance. Orion cracked his neck, forcing his body to obey. He had been a warlord of the Terran supremacy, one of the last. He had been built for war, and war had returned for him. He pressed his hand against the console. What woke me up? There was a brief pause before Maelstrom's response. A distress signal. Activated by the Galactic Accord. Silence. Then, Orion laughed, a low, guttural chuckle that turned into a full-bodied growl of amusement. Oh, you hypocritical bastards. He shook his head, taking another deep breath, stretching his limbs until the pain dulled. The very same alien coalition that had banished humanity, outlawed war, and hunted his kind to extinction was now screaming for salvation. Poetic. Show me the transmission. The holoscreen blinked, shifting to a recorded message. A desperate alien voice filled the chamber. This is Supreme Chancellor Vulcan of the Galactic Accord. If any Terran vessels remain, if any of you are still out there, we are under attack. The Zelvan swarm has consumed half the known galaxy. We cannot fight them. Our fleets are useless. We need you. The voice was ragged, barely holding together the veneer of command. In the background, screams echoed, the unmistakable sound of war. Orion smiled. Good. His fingers danced over the control panel, reactivating core systems, watching as Hellwinter's status updated in real time. She was wounded, but she was still alive. He felt the power thrumming beneath the ship's hull, the deep, predatory hum of its reactors spinning back to life. It was not a weapon of defense. It was an executioner's blade, forged in the final hours of humanity's reign. Full power to engines, Orion commanded. Plot a course for Celestis Prime. The AI hesitated. Commander, are you certain? Orion smirked. Oh, I'm more than certain. We're about to teach these cowards why they once feared us. A deep rumble coursed through the warship's body, a seismic awakening of old power. The ice around its hull shattered, debris drifting off into the abyss as the thrusters ignited. Hellwinter moved. And in the dying galaxy, where the last remnants of civilization stood on the precipice of annihilation, something new was whispered among the stars. A name. A warning. Humanity has returned. The warship surged through the void, its engines carving a path across dead space. Orion Dane stood at the command deck, eyes locked onto the holoscreen displaying the battlefield ahead. Celestis Prime, once a shining capital world, was now a dying ember, its skies choked with burning debris, its defense fleets torn apart. Maelstrom's voice echoed in the chamber. We are approaching the Celestis system. Zelvan forces have fully encircled the planet. The Accord's defenses are in full retreat. Orion scoffed. Of course they are. Cowards never learned how to fight. The screen flickered, revealing the desperate transmissions from Accord vessels. Pleading voices. Panic. Chaos. Orion listened without a trace of sympathy. They had wiped humanity from history, erased their legacy, and now they begged for salvation. An incoming hail flashed across the interface. Supreme Chancellor Vulcan's face appeared, pale, desperate, his reptilian features twisted in barely contained fear. Unidentified warship, you are entering a restricted combat zone. Identify yourself immediately. Orion leaned forward, voice dripping with amusement. You called for help. Here we are. Vulcan hesitated. This is impossible. There are no human warships left. Orion smirked. Surprise. Before the Chancellor could respond, the screen split to reveal another incoming transmission. The Zelvan hive mind. Its voice was layered, an eerie chorus that sent a chill through the Accord officers still on the line. Unknown entity. You do not belong in this battle. Flee. Or be consumed. Orion chuckled. You've got it all wrong. This isn't your battlefield. It's mine. The hive mind's voice sharpened. You are a relic of a dead race. You hold no power here. Orion turned his head slightly. Maelstrom. Targeting solutions acquired. Fire. Hellwinter roared. A single shot, a pulse of kinetic energy so dense it folded space around it, ripped through the Zelvan fleet. A flagship the size of a moon split in two, its grotesque biometallic structure collapsing in on itself. The explosion sent shockwaves tearing through surrounding enemy warships, a chain reaction of destruction. Thousands of Zelvan vessels disintegrated in an instant. For the first time in recorded history, the hive mind hesitated. The Accord commanders stared in stunned silence. Their fleets had been losing ground for years. Nothing had slowed the Zelvan advance. Nothing, until now. Orion leaned back. Still think I don't belong here? Vulcan's voice was barely above a whisper. By the gods, what is that ship? Orion grinned. A problem for anything that bleeds. The Zelvan responded with immediate retaliation. The swarm adjusted, shifting its war formations. A wall of writhing, organic dreadnoughts moved to counter Hellwinter's presence, launching waves of acidic plasma that burned through space like living fire. Incoming barrage, Maelstrom reported. Orion's expression didn't change. Deploy Hellfire protocol. The warship's exterior shimmered as a layer of ablative shielding absorbed the first wave of enemy fire. Then, from the underbelly of the dreadnought, Hellwinter unleashed a rain of plasma lances, each one capable of melting through planetary crust. They lanced through the Zelvan forces, carving burning wounds into their monstrous hulls. Orion's voice was calm, almost amused. Still think I'm a relic? The hive mind's response was immediate. Human. This war does not concern you. Orion barked a laugh. Oh, it concerns me now. The Zelvan adjusted again, shifting their focus. Orion had seen this pattern before. They were learning. Evolving their tactics. A typical enemy would retreat, overwhelmed by the swarm's relentless adaptability. But Orion wasn't a typical enemy. He was human. He saw what was coming before it happened. The Zelvan were attempting to collapse Hellwinter's position by diverting their forces into a three-pronged attack, funneling the warship into a kill zone. It was the same maneuver the Accord had used against humanity's last stronghold centuries ago. Smart move, Orion muttered. Shame it won't work. He tapped into the ship's neural link, commanding the AI without needing to speak. Maelstrom responded. Tactical countermeasures engaged. Hellwinter vanished. In less than a second, the dreadnought ripped a hole through space, using a micro-wormhole jump to shift directly behind the enemy formation. Before the Zelvan could react, Orion's warship unleashed devastation. Graviton mines detonated inside their ranks. The sudden localized gravitational collapse pulled enemy ships into each other, twisting their organic hulls into grotesque, crumpled wrecks. Quantum destabilizers ruptured enemy shielding, leaving the Zelvan vulnerable to the next wave of kinetic rail slugs, each round hitting with the force of a planetary impact. Entire legions of the swarm were annihilated in seconds. The hive mind screamed. For the first time in its existence, it knew pain. Orion exhaled. Now we're making progress. The Accord fleet had fallen completely silent, their ships motionless as they bore witness to something they never thought possible. A single human warship was winning. The screen flickered again. Vulcan's voice had changed, less commanding, more reverent. Commander Dane, if we survive this, you will have my eternal gratitude. Orion snorted. Keep it. I don't need your gratitude. I need your ships to stop running and start fighting. Vulcan hesitated. Orion's voice sharpened. You still don't get it, do you? This war doesn't end with me saving you. It ends with you learning how to kill your enemy. You want to survive? Then stop groveling and start acting like it. The Chancellor swallowed his pride. What would you have us do? Orion's smirk turned razor-sharp. Follow my lead. For the first time in decades, the Accord fleets rallied. Ships reformed into attack formations. Weapons primed. The last remnants of the galactic civilizations that had once feared war finally embraced it. The Zelvan swarm, for all its vastness, for all its monstrous ingenuity, had never prepared for this. For a fleet that had nothing left to lose. For an enemy that had been forged in the crucible of extinction. For humanity. Orion watched as the battlefield shifted. The Accord forces, for the first time since the war began, held their ground. The hive mind's voice crackled through the static. You have disrupted the balance. Orion's grin was pure, unfiltered menace. Yeah? Get used to it. Hellwinter surged forward, leading the charge. And the war truly began. The silence of deep space was shattered by the roar of war. Hellwinter cut through the chaos like a predator unleashed, its cannons singing a song of destruction. The Zelvan swarm, once thought to be an unstoppable force, reeled under the assault, their grotesque warships crumbling in Orion's wake. Vulcan's voice crackled through the comms, breathless with disbelief. We are holding the line. Orion didn't bother responding. He had no patience for their shock. They had spent centuries convincing themselves that war was a relic of the past. Now they were drowning in their own naivete. A swarm tendril of Zelvan dreadnoughts twisted toward Hellwinter, their organic hulls pulsating as they adapted, shifting their defensive layers to counter kinetic impacts. Orion saw the move before it fully formed. Maelstrom, recalibrate targeting parameters. Pulse rounds. Overload their neural nodes. Confirmed. Firing solution locked. Hellwinter unleashed a barrage of pulse cannons, each shot laced with electromagnetic resonance. The Zelvan's organic ships twitched violently, their biocircuitry frying under the attack. Some convulsed and imploded. Others lost all cohesion, collapsing into floating debris. Orion smirked. They learn fast. We learn faster. The hive mind's voice slithered through the comms. You are an aberration. This cannot continue. Orion leaned forward, voice cold. You're making a mistake. You think this is about survival. He let that sink in for a moment before driving the knife in. It's not. It's about winning. The Zelvan shifted tactics. Their fleets split apart, sending waves of smaller, faster biocraft toward the remaining Accord ships, targeting their engines and power cores in an attempt to break formation. Vulcan's voice snapped through the link. They are dividing us. We will be overwhelmed. Orion rolled his shoulders. Not if you stop thinking like prey. His voice sharpened. Listen carefully, Chancellor. Your ships are defensive by design, meant to outlast an enemy rather than destroy it. That's why you've been losing. A brief silence. Vulcan exhaled. Then what do you suggest? A grin pulled at Orion's lips. You do exactly what I tell you. He relayed commands with military precision, shifting the Accord's fleet into a tight assault wedge. Their warships, typically slow and cumbersome, were repositioned into kill formations, their limited weaponry focusing fire into concentrated kill zones. Hellwinter led the charge. The swarm recoiled as they, for the first time, were being hunted. The Accord ships adapted to Orion's tactics, striking surgically, not for attrition, but for destruction. Battleships normally used for planetary defense now moved with brutal precision, cutting apart the Zelvan with ruthless efficiency. Orion allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They were learning. Then, Maelstrom's warning systems flared. New signature detected. Anomaly forming at system edge. Orion's eyes narrowed. Show me. A section of space beyond the battlefield twisted violently. A rift tore open, light bending unnaturally around it. And then it emerged. The hive mind had sensed something new. A construct unlike anything seen before. It was no mere battleship, it was a leviathan, an evolution of war. Its surface was a writhing mass of living armor, regenerating even as it moved, covered in spires of biocannons pulsing with unholy energy. And it was headed straight for Hellwinter. The hive mind's voice returned, thick with venom. Adaptation. The flaw of all lesser beings is stagnation. You teach war. We evolve beyond it. The Leviathan opened fire. Hellwinter bucked as an energy lance the size of a capital ship slammed into its shields. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the dreadnought's hull. Warning sirens blared. Maelstrom's voice remained steady. Primary shields at 64%. Defensive systems recalibrating. Orion's hands tightened into fists. This was the move, the one he had been waiting for. The Zelvan were no longer treating him as a mere obstacle. They saw him as a threat. And that meant they could be baited. Maelstrom, full power to the main cannons. We're going head-on. That is not advisable. Orion grinned. It never is. Hellwinter accelerated, engines burning white-hot as it barreled toward the Leviathan. The beast's weapons screamed, sending out pulse barges, plasma rifts, and gravity distortions. Each hit ripped at Hellwinter's armor, scarring its surface, peeling away layers of reinforced plating. But it wasn't enough. Orion's voice was a growl. Charge the Oblivion cannon. Confirmed. Reactor diverting full energy. The Leviathan realized what was happening. It shifted, trying to alter its course, but it was too late. Hellwinter's central cannon ignited, absorbing the full might of its dark matter core. Orion exhaled slowly. Then, with the precision of a man born to wage war, he fired. The universe shuddered. The Oblivion cannon discharged a lance of condensed annihilation, a beam of destruction so absolute it tore through the very fabric of space. The Leviathan didn't die. It ceased to exist. The Zelvan's most powerful creation was erased in an instant, consumed by a force beyond its comprehension. The hive mind screamed, its psychic agony rippling across the battlefield. And in that moment, the tide turned. The Zelvan's cohesion broke. Their ships faltered. Their formations collapsed. The Accord fleet, seeing their enemy in true retreat for the first time, pressed forward with newfound ferocity. Vulcan's voice rang through the comms. "Commander Dane, they are falling back. We are pushing them from the system." Orion exhaled. His fingers flexed against the console, his blood still running hot. It wasn't enough. "Maelstrom," he said calmly. "We pursue." The AI hesitated. "The Accord forces require recovery time." Orion's jaw tightened. "And the Zelvan require total annihilation." Vulcan cut in, voice laced with uncertainty. "Commander, we have won this battle. The swarm is retreating." Orion turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "They're not retreating, Chancellor. They're regrouping. And the next time they come back, they won't underestimate us. They won't make the same mistakes." Silence. Then, slowly, Vulcan spoke. "What do you suggest?" Orion's voice was razor-sharp. "We take the fight to them." The Accord commanders murmured in uncertainty. This was not their way. They had only ever known defense, never conquest. Orion's gaze darkened. "You have two choices. You can sit back and hope they don't return stronger. Or you can finish this war." Vulcan inhaled sharply. "And if we refuse?" Orion smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Then you better pray I'm wrong." The battlefield lay in ruin around them, but the war was far from over. Hellwinder's engines burned anew, and Orion Dane, last of humanity's warlords, prepared to teach the galaxy how to end a war. The silence of victory was always temporary. Orion knew this. The galaxy had spent centuries avoiding war, pretending peace was a permanent state. They thought the absence of battle meant the death of conflict. They were wrong. War never ended. It waited. And now, the Accord had to decide if they were willing to finish what had begun. Vulcan's voice wavered through the comms. "You would have us invade the swarm's domain?" "We have never." Orion cut him off. "That's the problem. You've never done anything but run. That ends today." The Accord fleet was battered, but operational. Their ships, once built for defense, had proven they could kill. They had learned in the fires of battle. But would they have the will to continue? Orion saw the hesitation, the lingering doubt. The swarm is broken, but not beaten. If we let them recover, they'll come back stronger, smarter. They always adapt. You want to stop them? We end them now. Vulcan hesitated. We have one. They are retreating. Orion's jaw clenched. And the next time they come, they'll make sure you don't get a second chance. The warship's AI cut in, clinical and cold. Zelvan retreat vectors predict full regeneration cycle within 21 galactic cycles. Estimated probability of successful counter-invasion post-recovery, less than 10%. Orion exhaled. See? That's the difference between you and me, Chancellor. I know how wars actually end. A long pause. Vulcan's voice was quieter. And how is that? Orion's tone sharpened. With the enemy in the ground. The comms were silent. The Accord was not built for conquest. Their hesitation was ingrained, woven into their politics, their history. Orion could feel their fear. But fear didn't win wars. Decisiveness did. He leaned forward. Do you want them gone or not? Another silence. This one shorter. Then, Vulcan exhaled. You will have our forces. Orion grinned. Good. Now let's go break their goddamn spine. The War Council was brief. Orion laid out the assault plan, utilizing everything he knew about human war tactics, fast, overwhelming, merciless. The swarm's home territory was a nightmare of shifting biomass and hive networks, but Hellwinter's scanners could carve a path through. The key was momentum. No hesitation. No retreat. The attack would be fast, brutal, and final. As Hellwinter led the charge, the stars shifted, space bending as the fleet tore through hyperspace, straight into the heart of the Zelvan domain. The moment they arrived, the battle began. The hive mind had anticipated an attack, but not this soon. Not while it was still weak. The planet-sized hive world pulsed with defensive tendrils, massive bioorganic cannons rising from its surface, spitting molten plasma into the void. Orion barked a command. Suppressive fire. Burn a hole through their defenses. Hellwinter's cannons unleashed a storm of destruction. Plasma rounds ripped through the biological towers, reducing them to smoldering craters. The Accord fleet followed, weaving through the counterfire, striking with newfound aggression. Orion grinned. They're learning. The swarm reacted, deploying horrors the size of capital ships, massive creatures with bioplating thicker than warship armor. They rushed the fleet, seeking to consume anything in their path. Orion didn't flinch. Deploy obliterator drones. Let's see them chew through that. Swarms of autonomous drones erupted from Hellwinter's hull, each one a self-replicating war machine, designed to latch onto enemy ships and eat through their hulls like mechanical piranhas. The Zelvan monstrosities howled as their bodies were ripped apart from within. Orion pressed forward. The hive mind's voice slithered through the comms. Foolish human. You cannot exterminate us. We are life. We are evolution. Orion laughed, low and sharp. Then Die evolved. He pushed Hellwinter straight into the chaos, closer to the hive world itself. The enemy was throwing everything at them, but Orion had fought wars before their species even knew what death felt like. Inside the command deck, the reactor hummed, its power building. Maelstrom, how long until the Omega Lance is fully charged? 72 seconds. Orion's pulse remained steady. We'll hold. More Zelvan dreadnoughts poured from the surface, but the fleet held. The Accord wasn't breaking. They had tasted victory, and now they wanted more. Vulcan's voice rang through. We are advancing. Your tactics, they are working. Orion grinned. Of course they are. The hive mind panicked. It realized this was not just a battle, it was an extermination. And Orion was the executioner. The hive world began to shift, its very surface folding inward, preparing to escape, to slip into another dimension. Orion's voice was ice. Not this time. The Omega Lance fired. A spear of pure annihilation lanced from Hellwinter's core, a beam so concentrated it punched through the planetary crust, straight into the hive heart. For the first time, the Zelvan screamed. The hive mind's voice shattered into fragmented howls. No, no, this cannot. The planet imploded. The void was silent. Then, one by one, every remaining Zelvan vessel convulsed, their minds shattering as their god died. The swarm collapsed. The war was over. The battlefield was nothing but wreckage and victory. Orion exhaled, his hands tightening on the console. The silence stretched, heavy and absolute. Then, Vulcan's voice returned, quiet, shaken. It's done. Orion nodded. Yeah. The Chancellor's voice held something new. Respect. You have saved us. Orion let out a breath, his tone unreadable. No. We won the war. The only question now is what you do after. Silence. Then, Vulcan spoke, firm. We rebuild. Orion's lips twitched. Maybe they had learned something. The galaxy had changed. And Hellwinter drifted into the void, its purpose fulfilled. For now. The battlefield was silent. What remained of the Zelvan fleet drifted aimlessly, their monstrous hulls split open, their grotesque appendages twitching in the cold embrace of space. The hive world, once the pulsing core of their empire, was nothing more than an expanding cloud of debris, torn apart by the wrath of Hellwinter's Omega Lance. The war was over. But Orion knew victory was never that simple. Vulcan's voice cracked through the comms, a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's finished. We did it." Orion exhaled, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the console. "You're sure about that?" The Chancellor hesitated. "The swarm is broken. Their coordination is gone. Without the hive mind, they're nothing but mindless husks." Orion's jaw tightened. "Maybe. Or maybe they're just waiting for us to turn our backs." Vulcan didn't answer. The weight of what had just happened hung over them. A war that had consumed the galaxy for decades, an enemy that had seemed undefeatable, wiped out in a single campaign. But Orion wasn't celebrating. He had learned long ago that war didn't end with a battle. Maelstrom's voice cut through the silence, cold and precise. "Enemy activity has ceased. No remaining hostile signatures detected within the system." Orion leaned back, running a hand over his face. His body was exhausted, but his mind remained sharp. This wasn't the first time he'd seen an empire burn. He had been humanity's last warlord, the architect of battles that had shaped the stars. And now, he had done it again. Vulcan's voice returned, more controlled. "The Accord fleet is securing the remaining wreckage. Our forces are regrouping." Orion let out a slow breath. "Good. Now tell me what happens next." The Chancellor hesitated. "We rebuild." Orion's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's what they all say." Vulcan's voice hardened. "You think we will become another empire like yours?" "I think," Orion said slowly, "that power doesn't just disappear. You spent centuries hiding from war. You thought it was beneath you. Now, you've seen what it takes to win. You think you'll just go back to peace and pretend this never happened?" The Chancellor was silent. Orion continued. "You changed the moment you chose to fight. The moment you followed my lead. You can't undo that. You don't win a war and then pretend you're the same people you were before." Vulcan's voice was quieter now. "What would you have us do? Become conquerors like your kind?" Orion chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't give a damn what you do. I just want you to understand that this was the easy part. The real test comes after." The Chancellor didn't respond immediately. When he spoke again, his voice carried something different. "Resolve. We will not make the same mistakes." Orion didn't argue. He had done his part. Whether the Accord learned from this or fell into the same cycle as every other civilization before them, that wasn't his problem. Maelstrom's voice chimed in. "Incoming communication from Accord High Command. They request your presence for a debriefing." Orion snorted. "Pass." Vulcan sounded almost amused. "You're just going to leave?" Orion stretched, feeling the weight of battle settle into his bones. "I wasn't here to make friends. I did what I came to do." The Chancellor hesitated. "And what will you do now?" Orion's gaze drifted to the stars, the vast, endless void stretching before him. He had been asleep for 700 years, awoken only because the galaxy had needed a monster to fight another monster. But now? The war was over. His war was over. And yet, a part of him knew there would always be another battle. He smirked. "I think I'll see what else has changed." Vulcan's voice carried an edge of something Orion couldn't quite place. "If we ever need you again." Orion exhaled. "You know where to find me." The comms cut. The Accord fleet began their work, securing what remained, preparing for whatever future they thought they could shape. Orion had no interest in it. His job was done. He turned to the warship's AI. Maelstrom, set a course. To where? Orion leaned back, letting the silence settle. The galaxy had spent centuries trying to forget humanity. And yet, here he was, proving that war didn't forget its champions. His grin was sharp. "Surprise me." Hellwinter's engines roared to life, and the last warship of humanity disappeared into the void.